Welcome back to the Rules of Engagement. Before we jump into our next segment, let me remind you guys, if you're unsure what career you want to get into, or if you're considering a career in game design or in the esports industry, go ahead and check out Full Sail University. Go to www.fullsail.edu/MLG, and then there you can get more information on Full Sail's programs in game design, 3D animation, video production, audio engineering, all these cool different skill sets that you need to really get a great career in the game design or esports industry. Of course, it's one of many options, but it's one you should definitely check out. Full Sail University is, of course, the education partner of Major League Gaming. Moving on to our third segment, we're going to talk about in Zerg vs. Terran, how to play from a disadvantage. So we're going to talk about, first, from the Terran perspective, defending against the roach baiting timing, and if you do it correctly, you'll be at the advantage. So then we're going to talk about, from a Zerg perspective, if you have a disadvantage, however you got it, basically, if you got the disadvantage in basically the early mid-game, trying to play from behind in that mid-game, and then also going back to the Terran perspective, how to play against Infestors and Ultras. Or an Infestor-Ultras combination, I guess is more specific. So we're going to start this game at the 7-minute mark. And one thing we note is Polt, one thing he does very well, if he's taking his very fast third command center, right? And in fact, I think he normally goes double E-base right now as well. So very few units to defend. If you're going to do this, it's very important. Almost every Terran does this for a reason. They get mobility units. They get either it's a Reaper expanded on the Reapers from the start, or more likely at this point, of Hellions. If you have those mobility units, the reason they're fast is so you can go around and scout and have map control, right? So you really want to use that. You want to scout aggressively against your opponent. Hellions aren't as great in a straight-on confrontation, but they are extremely good at scouting, right? So make sure you have your opponent's watchtower, unless you're going to get a whole bunch of roaches early and take it. And then make sure you keep poking in here, right, and seeing what they're doing. And you'll see things like this. Because you have the map control, you should have the advanced warning to defend against an all-in. Of course, Goswser is going for that, if you look at his point of view. He's going for that roach baiting all-in. It's very common on the, right now at top level ZvT. And it really shouldn't work if the Terran is on top of their scouting, because as soon as they scout it, they just go ahead and get a tank, right? So the most important thing is scouting, and the second most important thing is knowing how to make a correct defense. Get extra bunkers, you even get a bunker on high ground if you want, fill in this wall. But as long as you go ahead and you get that siege tank, you should be absolutely fine versus the all-in. You could even, you're going to lose some depots here, but that's not the end of the world. And sometimes actually Polt's held this attack without losing depots before. But as long as you have a tank there, as long as you micro the SCVs away as much as you can, you should really take minimal losses, just a few losses if any, just because the tank will just keep killing everything. And you want to have some SCVs down to try to repair things, but keep them back from those roaches of the tank, the Marauder, the bunker, do their work. Going forward here, of course, Goswser is going to try to run in and pick off an SCV where he can. Maybe do a little bit of damage here, but he won't be able to do too much. He's able to kill a second tank, but losing so many units for it, not quite worth it. Now he's in a situation, just because Polt was so attentive in scouting, where Goswser is behind in the game, right? It's pretty obvious, right? He's only got 6 more workers, and he's at a point where his third hatchery is halfway done against an opponent whose third command center is done. He's triple orbitals. Also, the upgrades are even, but Polt already has, a decent production line. He's already got a factory, a couple barracks going down, a star pump going down, more barracks, and Goswser's lair is just started. So infrastructure-wise, Polt is way ahead. Economy-wise, he's ahead. And Goswser can't even crank out pure drones because of this Reaper Hellion force at his front door. So he's definitely behind in the game. And that's, that happens, right? Everyone has those games you're behind. Maybe it wasn't because you failed an attack. Maybe it was because 4 Hellions got in your base early and got 15 drone kills, right? That's not enough to end the game. Like, you shouldn't instantly leave if you're a Zerg player that happens. But you should realize that you're behind by a little bit in the game, and you should adjust your playstyle accordingly. And so, I think the best way... There's 2 ways to play from behind. In all matchups. So no matter what race, what matchup you're playing... well, actually, there's 3 ways. But one of the first way is play your standard game and just try to outplay your opponent, right? To say, I'm going to do whatever I was doing, and I'll just play better than my opponent by enough that I'll catch up. And that can work sometimes, but at the very top level, it's not going to work as often. And also, if you're behind by more than a little bit, it's going to be very hard to make that work. Now, the other 2 ways, one is try to play very base tradey style. Even if you're behind, if you play base trade, it gets crazy. And if you're better at playing base trades than your opponent, you may win the game. So that's always that's like a Zerg vs Protoss go-to. If you're ever behind a Zerg vs Protoss, go ahead and base trade. But if you're ever playing versus a Terran with whatever race, I would highly not recommend going for the base trade. It's like the age-old rule, right? You never want to base trade Terran. So that leaves you to the third option. And the third option is go for very cost-efficient units, right? If you're Terran, or sorry, if you're Protoss, you fall behind versus Terran early, what do? You try to rush Psystorm as fast as possible, because all it takes is a couple great Psystorms. If you catch your opponent off guard, you're right back in the game. Or you can go for DTs. DTs could potentially be cost-efficient. If they can't see them, they're going to lose a lot of units to DTs. If you're Zerg, it means Infestors, right? And if you're Terran, by the way, it probably means Widow Mines and or Hellbats, those type of units. Or it means drop play, because drop play can be very cost-efficient, has a potential to, if it's controlled very well. Same as Infestors, same as Storms, right? It's a potential to be very cost-efficient. Drop play, Infestor, Storms. So that's what Goswser does. He says, you know what? I'm not going to play a standard ZvT where I take a 4th base and I try to fight him with Speeding Baning, because I know I'm already behind, and I also know, Polt's insanely good. If I just play a standard game versus him from behind, I'm probably going to lose. So, I mean, this maybe Goswser's standard game, so it actually is points 1 and 3, and that's fine. But the idea is you go for cost-efficient units, and you just delay your macro a bit, right? So he doesn't take the 4th as fast. The Protoss won't take a 3rd as fast. And he goes for those Infestors. If he can land a couple key Fungals, he's going to be in good shape. He goes straight to Hive as well. If he can get those Ultras out, Fungal plus Ultras can often turn the game around very, very, very convincingly. So that's the whole plan of Goswser. And Polt here, who was looking to deny the 4th base, is in a situation where, he can't deny the 4th base because it's not there. And yes, that would normally put him as a position where he's really far ahead, but because Goswser techs so fast for Infestors, Polt's still ahead, but it's not game over, right? If he can land the right Fungals, if he can get good engagements, Goswser can still easily win this game because he made the right strategic decision when he fell behind early on in the game. So now we're going to talk about it from a Terran perspective. The opponent's made his decision. Maybe he made a decision from the start and he has a 4th base as well, and you're able to be annoying about it. Maybe he didn't fall behind as much early in the game, but whatever it is, you're Terran and you're playing versus a Zerg. He's using Infestors, basically with Zerglings, or later on Infestors with Ultras. And so this can be very difficult as a Terran player, because if your army gets fungal, Ultralisk will chop up every Terran army within seconds, basically. So it's very difficult to fight Ultras Infestor heads up with basically bio units. If you have a whole ton of Widow Mines, you can make it happen. Or if you have very Marauder heavy, you can make it happen. But in general, Fungal Ultras is very strong against Biomine in a straight-on confrontation. But the disadvantage is Ultralists can't fight drops very well. They get stuck around the minerals. Infestors, of course, can't kill Medivacs very efficiently either. It takes a lot of energy to kill Medivac. And if they're spreading out Ultras and Infestors, they're not going to have as many units in each location. You can start overwhelming them. And they're very expensive to replace. So drop play is very, very, very good against someone using Infestor Ultralisk. You put your guys behind the Roach Warren like that, and even Speedings aren't very effective against it. And then even into major engagement, you don't have to win. You have to keep them busy because, of course, your drop play can do a lot of damage. So if your opponent's going for cost-efficient units, you don't have the right answer to it. They're going Infestor Ultras, and you don't have a billion Marauders. They're going Psystorm Charge Lot, and you don't have Ghosts yet. That's when you use a drop play in those situations, because in drop play you can be very cost efficient, and if you use a lack of mobility from your opponent. So as you do the drop play, it's important to try to come up with a great tactical plan. So there he was trying to put on pressure, do the drop play, and he was also expanding behind it. It's very important if your opponent is using cost efficient units to out macro them, right? So that's why it's very important for Polt to go ahead and take this 4th base. If he tries to just keep hammering on 3 bases, even if he does nice damage with the drop, if he can never kill his opponent's army, he's going to starve out. And his opponent, even if his economy's bad, if his army's very efficient, it's not going to matter in the long run. So continual pressure from the front here as well. And then when his opponent tries to get 2 units in the front, he keeps him busy here. That's when he starts working the drop play again. Here he's just basically throwing away a few units for no really great reason. Because these battles, he's not going to trade super well, and he doesn't have a drop going on either. But fortunately, the Infestors were a little bit late to the party, so it wasn't that bad for Polt. But it still was not the right idea. Again, Infestor Ultra is so strong in a direct confrontation, not as mobile. We're going to go for it again, and Polt's going to try to rebuild his army from the little bit of a mistake there. And again, doing exactly the whole goal, right? Keep the pressure on and send in those drops as well. Now, one thing that's important to point out is, actually, let me just pop up this screen. What's really interesting about Infestor Ultras, from a Terran perspective, is everyone's seen, especially over the last, couple months, Terrans really love to expand close to the Zerg, right? So, for example, if the Terran wants to attack the Zerg base over here, right, they usually expand right here. And the reason why is because against Speedlings and Banelings and Mutalisks, a big threat is Zerg counterattacking your base, right? So If you're Terran expanding here, right, the Zerg can keep sending in guys over here. Mutas can fly back here. And you basically have to have a whole bunch of guys here, and then that's not close to it to be able to attack your opponent's space, right? If you expand over here, you can attack and defend from the same perspective, right? And that's because of the fact that your composition is slower than the Zerg's, right? So you'd rather keep the two important expansions, the one you want to kill, the one you want to protect, as close together as possible because your army's slower. So the shorter distance between the bases, you can still kind of be at both places at once, and your speed is of less advantage. If you're fighting against Infestor Ultralisk, it should be the opposite, right? So if you're fighting against a composition Infestor Ultralisk that's stronger than you in a direct fight, but your advantage is you're more mobile, that's where you want to go ahead and take the corner expansions instead, right? You want to expand away from your opponent because you basically don't want them to be able to kill your planetary and also be right where they need to be to defend your fort base. So try to use that mobility play to your advantage by expanding away from them and then keeping all the action attacking this way, attacking this way, attacking this way, right? Keep all the action away from your expansions when you're playing against a composition that's stronger than you in a straight fight, but is slower than you. So that's exactly what we see Polt doing here as he's taking his fourth base in this location instead of over here, right? I mean, eventually you might take this one as well, but you don't want to be forced to defend this. This should be a base that you can sacrifice if, like in this situation right here, a planetary here would be dead. It just would be. These ultras would just walk over, they'd kill it, and it would only take them like 10 seconds, then you could just walk back and defend the fourth base. So you really want to make this space, if you take it later, make sure it's an expendable one because it's going to be very difficult to defend against Ultras Infestor. But anyways, drop play comes in here, and because Ultras Infestor was so slow and it was so distracted over here, and there was no target, right? I mean, maybe Goswser should have tried to run up here and attack it, but that would be a tough call, and because he would kill one planetary, but there's so many more bases now that could be moved to retake it, that the drop play is just too damaging. And now if you're talking about how is Zerg to deal with this, from a Zerg perspective, this type of multi-pronged attack where they keep it pulling you this way and that, and your Infestor Ultras army is immobile, and your speedlings can't quite deal with drops because they do things that they drop behind the mineral patches, they drop near areas where it's hard to surround them, so the speedlings alone can't quite do it. Normally as Zerg, if you weren't as far behind as Goswser was in the beginning, or if you can stabilize long enough, take dead a strong army, and then also get the extra minerals, you can want to build a lot of sack defense. Now, Goswser knows that and usually does it, but this game, unfortunately, he didn't have the money, right? He had to get to Ultra Infestor so fast so he could be cost efficient, and that meant not having the economy to build a sack defense as well. And then, because he's lost this space and he's going to lose his main, all his tech, he's forced into doing one last desperation attack, which is not going to work quite as well as he wants. He does take down a planetary, but he lost, a lot of his key units. And taking down the one base, like I said before, Polt can just retake it. Goswser's back on defensive duty now. And as these bases get taken out, he's going to be stuck again in one more desperation attack. Right now, the problem is he doesn't have the money to get the sack defense that he needs to solidify his bases. So, Polt again draws him on one side with the drop play over here. And then, of course, there's a drop play over here as well. And just speedlings can't deal with these attacks. They just can't. As long as the Terran stays in an area where there's no service area, he has medevacs to heal, pure speeding is pretty weak against the bio army. And this bio army really is not going to have an answer unless he sends his whole army back. He doesn't want to do that because it would take too long because it's slow. And so he's stuck again in that one last attack. And this time, he doesn't have enough, Infestors or Queens to support. Ultras get mowed down, and he's managed to. So, really cool thing about that game, in fact, from a Terran perspective, early on, use your mobility units to scout aggressively. If he didn't scout those roaches when they were leaving the Zerg base, if he didn't get that siege tank siege up on the high ground as soon as possible, get that second bunker being built, he could have taken a lot more damage to that attack, and it would have been an even game going forward, or even Goswser would have been ahead. So, scout aggressively if you're doing macro builds. Or, you know what, if you say that's hard to keep track of scouting, it seems very difficult for Terran to do, don't build the Hellions early on. Just build like 1 or 2, put them at the watchtower, and then instead of getting to 4 or 5 extra Hellions, just get your tank faster. And as long as you have a tank on the high ground, it'll be safer as everything. So it's not like you have to scout aggressively, but if you're both investing in harassment units, and you're macroing greedily, right? You're expanding fast. Expanding fast is always fine, but if you're going to do that and you're going to invest in these fast Hellion units that aren't that strong at defending, that's when you really need to scout. If you're doing all these things to make your defense very, very light. And then also, if you're a Zerg player, if you're behind, go Infestors. If you're a Protoss player, you're behind, go straight for Templar. If you're a Terran player, you're starting to fall behind, start base trading, right? Use a draw play, just say, I'm not going to defend. I'll just load up my units and try to avoid him. And then I'll just, basically, if he attacks, I'll base trade. If he doesn't attack, I'll be playing super greedy, so I'll get back in the game. And then, of course, the last point, if you're a Terran player and you're facing against Ultras Infestor, unless you have a ton of Widow Mines, and like insanely good concaves, very Marauder heavy. If you don't have the ideal army, if you're very Marine heavy like you'd be for most of the mid game, use draw play instead of going straight head to head against that Ultras Infestor combo. This wraps up our third segment. We'll take a short break and be on to the Q&A.